This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 62.
Things that a lot of times we kind of lose in the transition to when they come to high school is even our students that come in and they're rocking like honors level classes, even AP classes as freshmen, like they are still transitioning to high school too.
Welcome to a real world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Ehrman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am unfortunately here without my co-host, Mr. Matt, the Family Man Rogers. Matt had to take care of some family matters tonight, so it was just me and our amazing guest, Chris Stuchko. And so what I want to highlight before I share the conversation that I had with Chris, which was outstanding, and I think everyone will enjoy it. It was a little bit different than we've had so far on the show, is this idea of taking a personal day, a sick day. Classroom teachers were always so hesitant to take that personal day or that sick day. Maybe we feel guilty, like we need to be there with the kids, or maybe we're stressed about, having to take that personal day. What I will say is, one, do not feel guilty. They're your personal days. They're your sick days. You're allowed to take them. If you don't feel well, don't go to school. Take the day to rest. You need to be able to give your students 100% as much as you can. And if you don't take those days, you're not going to be able to do that for your students. So get rid of that guilt and take them if you have them. The second thing I'll say is it's a lot of times more work to prepare for that sick day or that personal day when we have to get ready for a classroom. As a self-contained fifth grade teacher, I knew what it was like because you had to plan the entire day. When I transitioned into being a STEM teacher, and I was teaching, very similar lessons, I could kind of leave the same challenge for the fourth grade and the fifth grade class. And then if the next time I was out, if I had a different fourth grade and fifth grade class, I could reuse it. So as a secondary teacher, if you're teaching multiple classes of the same subjects, you can kind of fall into that category. But what I'll say is, to try to ease the stress for yourself, is you should be able to create subplans that you can use year to year. Whether you're self contained or whether you're teaching multiple classes, there are probably skills that you have in your curriculum or in your content that are important for you to visit. They're important for you to teach. Maybe it's something that's from a previous grade level that they need a refresher on because it's important content in your classroom, but it's something they kind of just need practice with, review with, independent review with, or something that you'd be confident that a sub could lead. And what I'll say is, make those sub plans, make those activities and lessons, and use them year to year. I had those lessons where it didn't matter if I was out in November, December, January, February. If I was out in that time range, I could leave that lesson, I could leave that activity because it'd be valuable for my students, and it didn't matter when they got to it, as long as they got to it before March. And so if for some reason I wasn't out, then I could teach it myself. So make it easier on yourself to have these lessons that you can insert regardless of where you are at in your pacing and your curriculum, so that you can make that sick day or that personal day less stressful on yourself. So that is completely unrelated to our guest tonight, but related to the fact that Matt's not here with me. Take those days if you need them. Our guest tonight, like I said, Chris Stuchko, he is from near me in Pennsylvania, ninth grade special ed teacher. We had a fantastic conversation. We jumped into co-teaching. We dove into the skills that we want all students to learn, but especially that he really tries to hit home with his students on his caseload in ninth grade, as well as his podcast. It's a really cool concept. I can't wait to listen to a couple episodes and subscribe to it and follow along with his journey. But we talk about our ninth grade experiences. We talk about what school meant to us then, and the stories that stick with us. So this was a really fun podcast. I enjoyed the conversation a lot. And I think you will as well. So he gives some really great advice right at the end of our show. So be sure to stick throughout as you listen. If this is the first time you're joining us, because maybe you know Chris or maybe you just found us, please hit the subscribe button if you have not already. Subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you're listening, or on YouTube if you are watching me right now. We are available on both. And as always, you can also visit our website at powereduup.com slash, well, this would be slash show 62, or you can just go to powereduup.com and you can find all our resources there. So without any further delay, let's bring in Chris for that fantastic interview. Hi, Chris. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Ken?
I am doing excellent. I'm super happy to have you here with me. So to kick things off, why don't you just officially introduce yourself? Let us know where you're tuning in from, and just kind of a snapshot of what your career in education has looked like so far.
Sure. So my name is Chris Stuchko. I am a ninth grade teacher at Emmaus High School in Emmaus, Pennsylvania. So we're kind of close in geographic location. If you don't know where Emmaus is, if you're listening from all over the world, the one thing that our school is known for the most is our field hockey program. At Christmas time, we had our field hockey coach who has won 1,000 total games. But she was on the Today Show after our team won the state championship this year, and they did a huge feature about her. So if you've heard Emmaus in the news, it was probably from that particular event. So I live, right outside of Emmaus, actually less than 10 minutes from the school. So it's nice. I don't have to travel very far. Originally, I taught in the Allentown School District as well. Just to When I started off my career, I taught for 3 years at William Allen High School in the city of Allentown as well. So that's kind of my path in education. I've been at Emmaus now for 13 years. So this is my 16th year in teaching. So kind of how I got into education. I was not one of those people that decided, at an early age that I wanted to be in education and that I was always going to be a teacher. I went to school to be a journalism major. I went to the University of Maryland thinking that I was going to be the next great sports reporter. I worked at the student paper. I worked for our athletic program. I did an internship at Sports Illustrated for Kids when I was in college. And then the time came to get a job after school. And I worked for a short time at the Daily Local News in Westchester, Pennsylvania, as a sports reporter there, which was awesome. But sports happens on nights and weekends. And I had a fork in the road. Was it going to be a career of working nights and weekends or a more normal job? And I had, I didn't have this like burning desire to be a teacher, but I wanted to guarantee myself a job when I went back to school. I kind of always had the, wanting to help people thing. So I went back to school at Lehigh University and got my master's degree in special education and my initial teaching certification. And I have been in special ed ever since. So that's kind of like my education backstory. Like I don't have I was in 5 years old playing school. I didn't have that burning desire to be an elementary teacher, but I wanted to guarantee myself a job. So I went into special education. So that's kind of where I've been since. So that's a little bit of my backstory. I'm sure we'll get into other stuff as we kind of go through our conversation as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thinking about where you're at right now with your position, so I have found moving into secondary instructional coaching, high school special education is interesting compared to my background as an elementary teacher. And when I taught fifth grade, we had a learning support teacher that I would collaborate with. Students were either incorporated into my classroom, sometimes they were pulled out, sometimes we were co-teaching, and we also had one of our autistic student programs as well. Some similar setup. When you get to high school, just with the dynamics of student schedules being very different from student to student, and the levels of support, how would you define your role in terms of the perspective of the student? Like if I asked one of your students, why is Mr. Stuchko here? What is his main priority, his main role for you to be a successful student in high school? What do you think they would say?
That's an interesting question. I've never been asked the question that way before. Is what would the student say? So one of the things that in my position we really try to like and hold up with the students is that both of our we do a lot of co-teaching models in our district. We do have some smaller group classes and some more specialized programs, but the majority of our special education teachers do the majority of us do co-teaching model. So we don't really tell the kids who is the special education teacher and who is the content teacher, at least in the classes that I teach. um, I teach a ninth grade science class, which is not very technical. I don't have like a lot of like biology knowledge, and science isn't even my background. So I have, kind of found a really nice spot in with my ninth grade science that I kind of have learned the content over several years. My hope is that the students kind of like see both of us in the classroom as equals. And I think one of the things from my own department that has been great that I work with is that they've really recognized me as an equal and allowed me to contribute in the ways that I can contribute. Like I don't pretend to know the content and I don't pretend to know like the best way to teach every single thing. But if a kid needs individualized help or if they need a little extra support, that's kind of what I offer to them in the classroom. They probably see me in and out a lot because there are some classes that I do split, and then obviously as a special education teacher, I have to hold meetings and talk with other students that are not in my classes but on my caseload. So they probably see me kind of buzzing around, trying to do lots of different things. But what I hope is, and I hope this for all the special education teachers that are listening, is that we are viewed as like equals in the classroom. We're not just like the helper teacher, or we're not just, the person that's here for like one person. Like we try to like when we co-teach in our school, we really try to make sure that both teachers are, held in the same regard and not like, singled out as like you're here for that person and you're here for the rest, like that yours versus mine philosophy. So I hope that the students would recognize that both of the teachers in the class are there for the same reason for all the kids, whether you have an IEP or not. And a lot of times at the high school level, if you're in like a co-taught class, you can't walk in and tell who has an IEP and who doesn't. So I think supporting all the students is definitely something that's super critical in my role. So hopefully that's what the students see as well too.
Yeah, so co-teaching is it's one of those things, and there's multiple things you could relate to this in education, but it is an art and it is a science. If it is not implemented effectively, and you kind of alluded to that, where it's like, hey, I'm the main teacher, and that other special education teacher, they're just here to support a few of the kids. That is not co-teaching, and it is not successful, I think, for either party, in terms of the teachers and for the students involved. So, for someone looking to possibly start co teaching, or someone in their first year or two, or maybe a partnership of teachers that are listening to this that are embarking on co teaching, what advice would you give for both the regular education teacher, who's the quote unquote content expert, and then the special education teacher coming in that classroom to create a great partnership?
The one thing I would say first is just that you have to communicate. Like, I hate this saying, but I'll say it anyway. They say like co-teaching is like a marriage. Um, and, not every marriage is a smooth marriage. So, communication is the key to all of it. And a lot of times as special educators, we might go into a class where we're not necessarily familiar with the content. So I think having that conversation about your comfort level of what you're going in to teach is important, and kind of figuring out like your strengths and the other person's strengths and kind of seeing how it can work. Like like you said, like I don't pretend to be the content master or like delivering content. There are days where I do, and there are days where I don't. And I think as a special educator, you kind of have to be comfortable with the role. I think the regular education teacher usually is the person that has been delivering content or is the one that's been in front of the room for the long time. And it is hard to give up that control. But I think as a special education teacher, kind of like my job is all about like accommodating, whether it's our students, whether it's ourselves, whether it's, the other adults as well too, like working with like instructional assistants or paraprofessionals, like trying to get like fit all these like puzzle pieces together. Um, So definitely the communication piece and focusing on each other's strengths would be important too, because I think one of the things that I've been very fortunate with as I've been co-teaching now for 11 or 12 years is like the majority, mostly every person that I've worked with, I've been open and like they've wanted me to contribute and like in the ways that I feel most comfortable. Like when I taught in a co-taught in a biology class or a chemistry class, like the last time I had biology was 1995. The last time I had chemistry was 1996. So like it wasn't something that I did in like outside after high school. So I was learning the content with the students. And I think one of the things that I bring to like that perspective is like if I think it's boring as an adult, like you can only imagine what the kids are sitting there like kind of going through. So like trying to make sure that it's relevant while still staying on the topic. So like having conversations with that, and it's hard. I think a lot of times because that person to person communication is really hard, and especially when you're like both professionals, and you don't want to like put anybody down, and not that you would, but like you kind of sometimes as a special educator feel like since you don't know the content that you're kind of like not as important. But I think one of the things that we're trying to really value is that we're not just like there to like fill out paperwork, but like we want to be part of the class as well too. So I think just kind of coming to an agreement, and then whatever your district does as like kind of a co-teaching model to make sure that everyone's familiar with it and to understand like what is expected of both people. It's not just like every time there is a problem behavior that the special education teacher should be taking care of it. Like as a classroom teacher, like you should have to both be responsible for all the different things. So that would be kind of my tips for like a co-teaching pairing. There are lots of different resources of co-teaching models, and if you went online and looked, and you get all sorts of stuff. But it's one of those things that once you get into it and once you kind of do it a couple of times and you get used to it, then you kind of feel like you can speak up to the person or kind of share the different things that are going on.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective to think about. We had a similar conversation. We had a student teacher, actually Matt's student teacher, on a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how much he was learning by seeing Matt teach and kind of relearning the content that he learned as an elementary student. And my advice to him was, don't lose that feeling of seeing how you're learning it, and maybe. He was even saying things made more sense to him now than when he was in school, because maybe Matt was teaching it slightly different than what his teacher had taught him. And, as someone who's not a content expert, you can say that to the teacher. You can say, listen, like, when you were explaining that concept, I was confused, or, it was a little bit hard for me to follow along, because the students may be feeling that same way because they're almost coming in with the same shoes of a lack of knowledge in that particular area. But I think the most important thing you hit on is the communication piece. Like you said, relating it to a marriage, it is so commonly used, but it's a great analogy because not all marriages work out, like you said, and communication is such an important part of that. And I think that both parties, both teachers, having the expectations that they are equally professionals and they equally have a role in the success of students. I've seen so commonly the special education teacher will complain that they don't trust me to do enough, or I'm not as involved as I want to be. And then the regular education teacher complaining, the special education teacher, they're not pulling their weight, I'm doing all the work and they're just helping a couple of kids. That animosity is not going to work. And most of all, the kids are going to see it. They're going to see that there's not a great pairing between those two, or when you have a great relationship between those two, they're going to see, the kids are going to pick up on that. They're going to see these teachers are collaborating really well, and it's a supportive environment where they can be highly successful. So I think it's great that you're doing that. I think it's great that you're being utilized in that role, because when it's done right, I think it's the best thing for those high school students. Are you
And I
primary?
think
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I agree with you 100% that the kids can pick up on all of it. Like they know like within the first couple days, and like even like like in the class that I teach now, there it's like not like a traditional like co-taught class where it's like we have students that are in this co-taught setting that just happened to be placed in it, but are in classes that are like 3 or 4 levels higher than where we're teaching. So it's really interesting. Like the different mix of kids allows for different styles of class. Like I teach ninth grade. So I have students like Algebra 1 is like their traditional ninth grade class, but I have students in my co-taught science class that are taking an Algebra 2 honors class. So they come in with a different perspective as well too. So kind of having that in addition to like, they see all the different models and just kind of telling them, like, I think a lot of students now don't even really bat an eye to like a 2 teacher setup. I think it's so common in a lot of places. And then when we have like instructional assistants and other adults that are in classes, like they kind of just, I don't know. I think kids are way more resilient about lots of things that we as adults we think they like really pick up on a lot, and I think they do, but like I think they're so used to a lot of it at this point that they don't they I think a lot of them like having more than one person in the room, whether they're there for one person, every person. So I think that is really important to kind of that to remember that, like, I think a lot of times the more adults that kids can like have a connection with, whether it's in a classroom or anywhere in a building, I think that's really important. So, if you're in a class of 30 and there's one teacher, then you have a 1 out of 30 chance to make a connection. But if there's 2 people in a 25 classroom, it's 12 to 1. So it kind of definitely lowers that ratio. So I think a lot of times, no matter what level the kids are, it's a benefit to like have multiple people in the room just to kind of be able to have those connections as well too.
Absolutely. I can, speaking of that, I can remember students that I would have when it was in my co-taught classes. It was primarily math that we were doing it with, that regardless of whether or not they were on the special education teacher's caseload, there was, particular students that would commonly go to her to ask for help, as opposed to coming to me, or vice versa. And for whatever reason, they had a more comfortable connection with her, or they had a more comfortable connection with me. And it's easy to, it's easy for me to say, like, like why aren't they coming to me for help? Why are they going to her for help? But in the end, it doesn't matter. They're going to someone for help, and whoever they have that stronger connection with, and they have, like you said, they're not only is the ratio being reduced, but just twice the opportunity for them to make a better connection. Because regardless of how great of a teacher you are, regardless of how much of an effort you make to connect with each and every student, there's natural chemistry and personality types that exist. And students, even if you give your best effort to one student every day, if they just naturally connect because of their personality connections to another teacher, you're increasing those odds of that taking place in a co-taught classroom. So when you get to see your students in multiple subject areas, as well as in any of your specialized classes, and just your interactions with them outside of class, what would you say are skills that you really focus on, that you want them to gain and empower themselves with as ninth graders, that will help them be successful in ninth grade, but also kind of transcend them through their senior year?
So the number one thing that we focus on a lot of is asking for help, and I think that's a really crucial skill for students with and without disabilities. I think they come in, they're kind of nervous about asking for help, and they just they're not comfortable with doing it. And I think that's one of those things where when they reach the high school level, that it's just the sheer numbers. Like I teach in a high school that has 2,800 kids. I see 25 kids per class period. I have a caseload of 30 kids in addition to the 6.5, 7 classes that I work with. So like, as much as I want to like know that every kid needs whatever they need at a certain time, like I physically can't. So having a student being able to recognize their own needs and asking for that help, I think is so critical to their own development. I often tell kids a lot of times, former NFL football player Marshawn Lynch, who played for the Seahawks and he went to the University of California. I
Love
was watching this
Skittles.
interview yeah, love Skittles, all the deal. I was watching this interview that he did once, and I would love to play it for the kids, but every third word was a word that you can't use in the classroom. And he said that he identified when he was in high school, he said the number one thing that he learned was being able to ask for help when he needed it. He said it was the most important skill that he learned because it allowed him, as somebody from Oakland, California, who I don't think he ever really dreamed of going to like a school as prestigious as University of California. He was able to do that and play in the NFL. And he said once he got over like the stigma of like being the kid that asked for help, it opened up the possibilities for him to do all the different stuff that he would like to do. So I think that's the first thing, is asking for help. And then the second thing is kind of recognizing, like, as a student with an IEP, like what are the things that you need extra support with? And I think a lot of times they come up from the middle school, they're new to the IEP process. I know in Pennsylvania, they don't have to come to a meeting till they're 14. So they're new. They kind of maybe have never been in a meeting. So the ninth grade year, they're new to the whole thing, and really like trying to figure out like what is it that I need help with and how can I work to overcome that. My one of my co-teachers, Brian Harkness, has told this uses this analogy for the last 5 years. I've kind of stolen it from him, and I always give him credit. Is, when you're a high schooler, you're coming into ninth grade, you're a year or two away from getting a driver's license. And when you drive a car, you can't drive the car correctly 80% of the time. You can't, kind of sort of park the car close to the curb. Like, you have to be able to do the things that are asked of you. You have to be able to pass the driver's test. You have to be safe on the road. You have to, you have to be able to do all those different things. So kids usually, if they want to drive, which weirdly in today's climate, like a lot of kids don't want to drive. I don't get it, but like they don't want to drive. But if they want to drive, they learn the rules of the road. They learn all the things they need to do. So when they're in a situation where they want to do something, they figure out a way to learn the skills that they need. So we try to impress that upon students that, like, as you go forward, you have to figure out the things that you want to do, what you need to do to get it, and where you might need that extra support and help. So I would say like those self-advocacy skills of like asking for help and knowing kind of what you might struggle with and how to overcome that, because at the end of the day, like, you don't get a driver's license that says like, student with special needs on it. You don't get to like go to your job and be like, I'm only coming in 80% of the time. Like, you have to be able to participate in certain things to progress through your adulthood. So those two things I think are pretty critical, like that we try to teach in the class, out of the class, like highlight in meetings, highlight, even through a lot of the other work that I do as well too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never really thought of an analogy like that. Students for, they're being exposed to, like you said, as ninth graders, as 14-year-olds, officially, possibly for the first time, but they have possibly been in a learning support special ed environment for 10, 12 years by the time they graduate high school, where they have, I don't want to say limiting expectations, but they're okay to, they have accommodations set for them, and then you hit the real world, and those are going to be ripped away in many cases. Um, do you, in those conversations, trying to get them to understand that these are my weaknesses, this is what I need to overcome, I need to work harder at this because I'm not naturally as good at this, do you also talk about what accommodations they do have, what supports they do have, and how they should leverage, and I don't want to say take advantage of those, but fully utilize them?
That's kind of, it's that's more of a newer thing that we're trying to do. And I don't mean it to sound like we've never done it before, but I think a lot of times when they come up from the middle school, they have these things and it's like, this is what you have. And that's it. Like, it's been determined at some point through an evaluation report or through recommendations, but like really getting the kids to understand, like, why is it that I have tests read? Do I ever want my test read? Do I like having my test read? Like, maybe no one's ever asked them. Like, a lot of kids at the high school level don't like being pulled out. They don't want to be singled out. They don't want to go to the room with the teacher. They don't want to like, have to do that kind of stuff. So like, what are maybe some ways that if you need a test read, like how can we accommodate that without you feeling like you have to be pulled out? Like, are you comfortable listening to it as an audio or a visual? Like, I know for our science class, when we have major tests or exams, I record a audio video version of the exam, and I put it in to the test so every kid can access it. But then that way no one feels like they're like singled out. Now I do like individual readings as well too, but like they all have this like audio video that they can access if they want it. Um, so really trying to get them to understand why things are there. And then I always ask students in my meetings too, like, is there anything that is not there that you think will help you to be successful? And recently there have been like, maybe I need like an extra day with assignments. Well, like, why do you need an extra day? And then we talk about that because working with students, we all know if we give them an extra day, that means, and as students ourselves at one point, that means they're going to wait one extra day and wait till like,
Right.
right before. So like, are they going to take advantage of the extra day? Like, what does that mean? Why do you need it? So really getting them to think about like those kinds of things and like the reason that they have certain accommodations in there, and getting them to understand, and maybe they don't need them all. I know like one of the goals like through high school is to like phase them out if they don't need them, because when they go to college, if they decide to go that route, there's only so many things that they get or can get. So we try to like have them be realistic as they go through, with what they can do, and those kinds of things. So really getting them to understand, like a lot of times they don't, like the question is like, why do you have an IEP? And the answer is, I don't know. And it's one of those, you have to kind of like maybe start at the ground level and be like, this is what's in it. Like, these are the things that you've had in the past. Like, do you use them? So, even though they're hitting high school, I think that like realization that it's starting to go onto them a little bit more, I think is it's the part of the transition to being in high school as well too. So really kind of getting them to understand those different pieces of it, I think is really important. And just getting them to understand, I often say this at meetings too, is like, we have 2,800 kids. I don't know the exact number, but I think I always overestimate, but like you could have 500 kids in our building that have an IEP for something. And it could be something as very severe as like like explosive behaviors, or it could just be something that you need a little bit of help on a test. And you have no idea when you're in the school building of which kids have an IEP. Like, you don't wear a special tag, you don't have to like report somewhere different. But getting students to just understand that, like, sometimes people just need a little bit of extra help to get what they need in order to be successful. So getting them to also understand that they're not like the only kid that needs extra help. And I think that's in ninth grade, that's a real struggle, because they're trying to, they don't want to be singled out. They want that identity. They want to be, with their friends. They want to make sure that they don't look like a fool in front of people. So getting them to understand that it's okay to get the things that you need, because a lot of times when they're in high school, like, I don't know, the statistics say like the friends you have like your freshman year are usually not the friends you have your senior year. And then when you graduate, like those friends within 4 years aren't really your friends anymore. So like they don't see that in the moment, but like you will always be, you know, dealing with your decisions and the learning that you do. So I think that's important to kind of always, keep in mind when we're having meetings and talking about the things that students
Right.
need.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, and that self advocacy I think is so important, especially for special ed students, but really for anyone. That was something I really tried to hit home with my fifth graders. Learning that skill, fifth grade in my district was the end of the elementary road, and trying to push them to be a little bit more independent. Parents were very commonly saying to me, hey, we want to let you know that we've always been very involved with homework and this and that, but we're trying to let go of the reins a little bit to see how they do with that independence, and just hitting home that asking for help, whether you have an IEP, whether you don't, whether you're typically the smartest kid or you're typically always struggling, when you need help, you have to ask for help. There's only two ways to learn things, and it's to learn it on your own, or it's to ask for help and have someone teach you and have someone guide you. And I would always try to share stories of when I asked for help, and how it benefited me. The one story I always enjoyed telling was so I had an elementary education degree, and I minored in math to have a math certification. And somehow I ended up in calculus 3. And I was in there with people studying to be physicists and math majors, and I was way out of my league. And the beginning of every class, we spent reviewing homework. And I asked how to solve every question I didn't understand. And in the end of that course, I ended up getting an A. And it was not because I understood it well. I navigated the course well enough to ask for help when I needed it. And I didn't care if the person next to me was thinking, man, I can't believe this guy is asking the fourth out of the fourth question on homework on how to solve it. That's such an important skill for those kids to develop.
And and real fast with your story, the reason I like that story too is that you're talking about a really high level college class, and I think one of the things that a lot of times we kind of lose in the transition to when they come to high school is even our students that come in and they're rocking like honors level classes, even AP classes as freshmen, like they are still transitioning to high school too, and they struggle the same way. It may seem like on the outside they have everything together and they're able to keep their grades up, but like they are definitely like having those same questions and dealing with ninth graders and kind of doing the stuff that I do, like in addition to seeing like the students that need the support to learn, at the one level, I also see like and hear like kids that are, we think that are just going to coast by really easily often need that same support and that same help too. So that's why, like, for me personally, like ninth grade is such a crucial year for what we try to accomplish with all these kids, because whether you are taking high level classes, and a lot of times for students that are taking high level classes, high school might be the first time that they're not getting straight 99s or straight A's, or things are challenging, like they don't know what to do. Like a lot of times they come to the high school and they don't know how to study because they've never had to study before. So like even students like that are also dealing with like that same like self advocacy skills. It may look a little different because they're in different classes, but it's the same thing that even students in in your co-talk classes are doing at the same level too.
Yeah, you hit on exactly the other piece that I wanted to hit home with that story with my students was school may be easy for you now. It may be easy in sixth grade. It may be easy in ninth grade. But I promise you, if you stay in school long enough, you will struggle. You will not be the smartest kid. You will not be able to coast by. So, learning those advocacy skills and study skills are going to be imperative because you're going to hit that roadblock at some point. And I would commonly tell them, hey, if you're struggling now, you'll probably be more successful in high school because you'll develop the skills you need to push through that struggle. So you've talked a lot about the ninth grade experience. So why don't you share with our audience a little bit? You host a podcast about the ninth grade experience. What does that look like? Why did you start doing it? What are you passionate about related to that?
So the podcast is called the Ninth Grade Experience. If you're watching on video, I have my 1 out of 1 T-shirt on, so you don't like go to a website to try and buy any merchandise. But so I started it 3 years ago in 2019. I got into podcasting. So I said earlier that I was a journalism major, and when like in like 2018-19 time, podcasts started becoming really popular. They've been around for a while, but I really got into them, and I'm like, you know what, I think like I would like to start something like this. And it was like kind of like the extension of like I haven't written in a while, I haven't done the journalism thing in a while. I said this could probably be a fun outlet for me. So I applied for a grant from our school district, like an education foundation grant, and I had no idea how to write a grant. I didn't even know what my podcast was going to be about. I didn't know what I needed. And of course, I was denied the first year. So I'm like, all right, I'll come back with it later. And then this next year, I figured I need to figure out something specific. And I was like, I teach ninth grade. We had just started like a ninth grade program at our school. I said, perfect. I'm going to do a podcast that focuses on the transition from eighth to ninth grade, talk about what it's like to be a ninth grader. I didn't see anybody really doing that, and we're going to go for it. So I did get selected for that. I got $1,000 to get really cool podcasting stuff, really cool microphones, which was nice. But in the end of the day, like it didn't make the podcast. So I had to go out and I had to like look for stories and try to figure out the angles and all the other stuff that I wanted to do. So our podcast primarily focuses on our school, like the ninth graders at our school. I'm trying to expand it a little bit to get outside of the school. I've talked to like guests at like a national level. Like I've had really interesting like random people on, like Brian Koppelman, who's the guy that created Rounders and Billions. I've had him on the podcast just because at the beginning of the pandemic, he put out this thing on Twitter. He's like, I'm sitting here doing nothing. If anyone needs a podcast guest, email me. I emailed him. He came on. It was fantastic. Like talking to this guy, couldn't have been a nicer guy. Half an hour of his time. It was awesome. I've talked to like some other people in the education space, authors, those kinds of things. But the real highlights of our show are when we get to talk to students about what they're going through in ninth grade. Because a lot of times, all the focus is like on the athlete or the actor and usually they're upperclassmen. But ninth grade, they have a really unique story. And my idea is that everyone has gone through ninth grade. Now, 99% of people go all the way through high school, but not everyone all over the place has graduated, but everyone starts high school. So a lot of times people will have a story, especially the adults, about something that happened in their ninth grade year that has kind of led them to where they are today. So a lot of times teachers have this like aha moment that they remember from ninth grade, or like a class that they were in, or an event in like a lunchroom. I always tell this story about our school psychologist who was just on recently talking about our our mental health symposium that she hosted. And I brought her up to her the story again. She told this story about an incident in the cafeteria where she had cream cheese, I think it was, in her hair during like a food fight or something. And some girl helped her out in her ninth grade year. And she kind of decided at that point that she wanted to be in like that kind of field of like helping people. And like that was like the weird turning point for her deciding she was going to be a school psychologist. So I think a lot of times ninth grade, people can remember that ninth grade year. They might not remember like a subject or something, but they remember a story, a club, an activity, something that they're really passionate about. So that's kind of the idea behind the podcast, is sharing those stories about ninth grade and kind of how they relate to current ninth graders or, parents of ninth graders. We really kind of bridge a lot of different things. I enjoy doing it. It's kind of like my release from the stress of the special education job. So it's nice to be able to talk to people from all different parts of the ninth grade, and even people that are getting ready to graduate and other stuff like that. So it's a lot of fun. As you probably, you host a podcast too. And I often say that it's an excuse to talk to cool people and find cool stories out. And mine just happened to focus on either the guest or the student's ninth grade experience. So that's kind of why I do what I do with the podcast.
That's awesome. Yeah, this is this powers me up, not to put a pun on my own podcast name, but it's one of the highlights of my week professionally. It reinvigorates me. The amazing teachers that I've had the opportunity to talk to. Before you came on, I was just updating our website, and I have a map of locations of every guest that we've interviewed, and just seeing the map and the spread of amazing teachers I've had the opportunity to talk to has really been an incredibly empowering experience for me, much more than I really anticipated. So what was your ninth grade story? Have you told it on the podcast? Should I be tuning into a specific episode, or can you share it here?
You know what? I've never really told my own ninth grade story, and I've toyed with the idea of doing it like May 19th would be, no, May 17th would be like our third anniversary. So I've toyed with the idea of going back and looking at that as well. But I'll give you the brief one, this since we're kind of local-ish here. So I grew up in Philadelphia, inside of Philadelphia, not outside of Philadelphia, not on the main line, not like in Lower Merion, I was in Philadelphia. So I went to a small Catholic grade school, St. George. I went there, and then all of my friends would have gone to North Catholic High School, which is no longer there. But I went to Holy Ghost Prep, which is located in Bensalem, right outside the city. So that was my ninth grade where I went. If you're from the Philadelphia area, it's not the Prep, which is St. Joe's, or LaSalle, which are two huge powers of athletics now that were not that way when I was in school. So I went there for ninth grade. I played basketball in ninth grade. And it was a really unique experience. It was an all boys Catholic high school. So, right away, the questions were always like, how did you talk to girls? Like all those different things. Like, But it was small. The school was like less than, at that point, I think it was less than 500 kids. I really got a chance to know everybody. Um, I tried to get myself involved with different things, like looking back on the yearbook, trying to figure out different stuff. So I always keep my ninth grade yearbook in my classroom in case we do anything related to that kind of stuff. Um, I remember doubling up in math class. Like, it's funny. Like, I don't have like that aha moment of ninth grade, like that I try to get out of my guess. Like, I guess if I really went back and looked, and what I was thinking of doing for the episode was like talking to some of my classmates and maybe old teachers and seeing what we all remember from our ninth grade. Um, I just know that I didn't live like everyone else was kind of like suburbs, like other areas. There was me and another kid that lived in Philadelphia, so we would carpool back and forth. But I never felt like excluded from anything. It was just that I didn't necessarily live, like people from my area didn't go there. So, in Philadelphia, the public high schools at that point weren't that great. My parents made an investment to send me to a private school. So really, I was never like a public school kid until I started teaching in a public school. I guess I went to a public university at Maryland, but it was a unique experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was small, and you got to really know the teachers, you got to really know your the classmates and other stuff like that. So yeah, so I've never really gone into great detail on my own podcast about my story. Now that I'm almost 100 episodes in, I probably should go back and tell that story. So thanks for the suggestion. So since you asked me, I'll turn it back around on you. We were talking a little bit before we started. So I know your ninth grade experience is a little bit unique because of where you kind of were. And your 10th grade experience was unique because of your ninth grade experience. So if you want to share either one of those, feel free to kind of to dive into either one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to school in Central Bucks, which is right outside of Philadelphia. And I will proudly say I never grew up saying I'm from Philadelphia. I always said I'm from outside of Philadelphia. Anyone that is on the eastern side of Pennsylvania kind of gets the inside joke we're telling there. But so ninth grade was in middle school for me. So I was in the middle school with seventh, eighth, and ninth graders. But we're always told you're a high school student. These classes are going to be on your official transcript. And as you were talking about your podcast about the stories, I was trying to think back on specific stories from my ninth grade year. As I get into that, what was interesting about my 10th grade year is my district opened a third high school that wasn't ready until halfway through my sophomore year. So my first half of my sophomore year was at one of the other schools. And as an athlete playing soccer, we would get bused to practice every day because half of our team was at the other high school that was housing our new school's CB South. So my ninth grade stories, I had two pop in my head actually. So, and they both did have a pretty significant impact on me as a person when I think about it. The first is at the beginning of the year, we had our summer reading project in our English class. And the book I read, it was only me and my friend. We're the only two that read this book. And apparently we picked a very unpopular one. It was a struggle to get through. And we had to do like an essay on it to start the year. And we did collaborate. We talked about it. We had to find 3 quotes and like do this different stuff. So we did talk and we did kind of work through it, but we wrote separate papers. We did the project completely separately. And our teacher accused us of cheating and gave us a 0. Didn't tell us anything, just handed it back, gave us a 0 and F. And I was lividly upset. Our parents were very upset. And I remember having a meeting with my friend, myself, both of our parents, and a principal and the teacher. And I told my mom that I didn't want her to speak. I wanted to speak. And it was kind of the first opportunity where I like stood up for myself in a professional manner. And the principal did override the grade, and we did not fail that project. I think we had to redo part of it or something like that. But it was an opportunity where I realized when I was able to approach it in a respectful, professional manner, it was much different than in a disrespectful, angry, this is ridiculous. I wouldn't have gotten anywhere. I wouldn't have gotten anything from it. So that was a piece where I realized that the way you approach a situation and the professionalism that you bring will have an impact on the result that you're looking for. The other thing was ninth grade was the year I started to get heavily involved in the school. I did stage crew for our musical. I played soccer for the school for the first year. So I became more involved, and I realized how much more I liked school as a student. When I became more involved, I made more friends. I found different friends. Even if they weren't people I hung out with on the weekends, I just felt like I knew more people in school. And so that had a major impact on me as a fifth grade teacher, because at the end of the year, we would take the kids up to middle school so they could tour it. They could meet the principal. They could meet the assistant principal. They could see the programs that were there, just like, get the intimidation factor out of the way in terms of, the new big school that they were going to go to. And I would so every year, I would just reiterate to my students, when you get to middle school, get involved. Try things that you're good at, that you enjoy, that you now have the opportunity to be a part of, and try things you've never tried before, because I wanted them to realize that that was going to be what made them enjoy middle school, is if they were involved in as many activities and programs as they could. So those would definitely be my two ninth grade stories that I didn't think of until we were in the middle of the show.
And if you sit here and you listen to the stories that you picked, and I often tell this to kids all the time, because we've done so many episodes, and a lot of them definitely come back to the same concepts. But like, your stories don't involve the amazing English lesson. Actually, it was a lesson in English that you kind of draw back on, but it wasn't like, on day 72 of your freshman year, you learned y equals mx plus b, and it changed your life. Like, that's not what you do. You remember the things where you're getting involved. And we talk so much. And like, when I have like students on, the students that are successful, not all students, but students that are successful, are involved in so much stuff. Like, as an adult, like, I sit and look. I had a student on this year who was taking the most intense class load that I've seen in a freshman take. He also was the JV goalie on the soccer team, and he was also on the varsity football team, and they play in the same season. He was one of the kickers on the varsity football team. So this kid, in the beginning of his freshman year, was taking like advanced math classes, advanced English classes, and was playing football and soccer. And like, you just, a lot of times when you're in a school, you don't realize that there are kids that are doing stuff like that. And the kid, one of the things that he said he had to learn right away was how to manage his time. And through those things of like being involved, it makes you acquire so many other skills. And like, when 95% of the adults that I talk to for the show always talk about a club, an event, a sports team they were involved with. Like, they always talk about that experience. So we talk all the time about how to get involved, what clubs are like. Like, a lot of the focus of the show that I do is for my high school, but it's applicable to like any school, where it's like, oh, like, ninth grade is super important, A, academically, and B, because you get to be a part of like, and you're the high school that you went to, the high school I work at, like, thousands of kids. When you're one of 2,800, it's hard to get a foothold. But if you join, let's just say, the Red Cross Club, because you're into the stuff that they're doing, or you want to be a part of the stage crew, like you said, now you're one of 100, or you're one of 50. And it really makes the big school small. Or if you're at a small school, you can be involved in so many different things. So, we all the time, that's what we talk so much about: getting involved, getting involved. And, my own son is going to be a ninth grader next year at the high school that I work at. And one of the things that I hope for him, he plays basketball, so he wants to obviously try and do that. But like, I want him to be involved in stuff, because I can just see the difference when kids are involved. They can tell the story of when I was in stage crew, when I was playing sports, when I was doing all this stuff. And that's the stuff that carries over, not, not that I spent 3 hours of homework for my AP US history class. Like, that's important. I'm not here to diminish that. But, how many adults that you talk to come up and, when they relive the glory days, talk about, oh man, I really killed that, ninth grade research project. It's never about that. It's about all the other things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that about the time management. I think that's such an important skill that kids can learn at any academic level, but obviously the older they get, the more that they can learn that. And when I looked back I don't know if I did it as a college student or maybe towards my senior year. I think maybe even my mom might have pointed it out. I played fall and spring sports, and my highest academic grades were the first marking period and the fourth marking period when I was busier. Second and third marking period, when I wasn't busy with sports, my grades diminished because I didn't have to be as regimented with my schedule. So that's really interesting. So
Yeah,
I go ahead.
yeah. So I was gonna say we see it all the time. We see kids like in the beginning of the year because we just have a lot of football players. Like when football season ends, they have to stay eligible, and then football ends, they don't really have anything that they need to stay eligible for. The grades go down, so they know like when they have motivation to do something, especially for high school kids, they find a way to get stuff done. A lot of times high schoolers get a knock on like not being motivated until they're motivated and then they figure it out.
Right. Yep, absolutely. So I want to jump into our lesson lens to try to learn more about maybe something you've taught, maybe something you've co-taught in the past. So question number one, is it a unit overview, a long-term project, or a single lesson?
I was going to focus on a single lesson within a unit, I guess.
Perfect. What is the grade level, subject area, and if the time of year is important, you can specify that.
So I will obviously, since I'm ninth grade, we'll talk about ninth grade. Time of the year is not necessarily important. Um, and it could be the thing I'll talk about is applicable to basically any class at any level, but I just do it as ninth
Okay.
grade.
Okay. Any particular subject area, or it's going to cross them all?
It can cross. I will talk about it from the perspective of science because that's where I developed the lesson. But it's applicable to basically everything. I would think it might be a little bit more difficult, like maybe in math, but I'm sure you can find stuff.
Okay. Awesome. So what were the objectives of the lesson?
So the objectives of the lesson were to kind of integrate like current events and real life examples of science in the world around our students. So um, I'll leave it at that and see where our questions go to kind of. I don't want to give too much away here.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So, what were the students actively doing during this lesson?
So the students needed to find current event articles on. At the time where I started it, it was basically any science related topic, but we've kind of tailored it to be more specific to the different subjects that we're teaching at the time or based on a lesson or a chapter that we're on.
Awesome. So, while the students are doing that, what is your role in ensuring their success?
So, one of the things that we did was we kind of taught them where to find good articles, or at least find articles. A lot of times they would just go to like a Google search and they would just search like a keyword and they would find something and it would
Hmm.
be like Encyclopedia Britannica. And I'm like, we're not looking for Encyclopedia Britannica. We're looking for current event news stories. So, just something as simple as like news.google.com and they can find current event stories. About different topics and even in news.google.com there's like little like subheadings that are like science or even teaching them where to look, so like in the science folder or in the health folder or technology, like things that are science related, so kind of helping them along with that process.
Yeah, I would say that's highly important right now, especially when you're scrolling anything on the internet, knowing if it's a valuable or reliable source. So, seeing as you've done this, you've already talked about some modifications that you've made. What advice do you have for yourself the next time you're going to teach this lesson to improve it?
So the thing that it's evolved over time. So that we called it Celebrate Science, and it kind of evolved from the very beginnings of it. It evolved. We used to do it as a homework assignment, and then what would happen was we would have like half of the kids not bring it in. So then you get into this weird spot where like half the kids have it, half the kids don't. So we changed it over time to be self-contained within the room so that everyone has an equal chance to find it. Plus, we know what they're looking at. We have traditionally in the past had it be like a written thing. We've adjusted like the paper length, we've adjusted like the other stuff with it. But I think now with like a lot of the digital recording tools, whether it's like Flipgrid or Moat or like other things like that, incorporating more varied responses, I think is something that I would like to incorporate more of, whether it's just do simple recordings or, you know, giving more non-traditional ways to kind of explain what they read or answer some of the questions that we had them looking for.
Yeah, that's awesome. Even, thinking about not necessarily a podcast, possibly a podcast, but uh, giving the students two roles where they're finding the article and they're doing the research and they're the quote unquote expert of that topic, but then also having the students interview someone else, so they have to take the seat of the interviewer trying to pull out information from their classmates might be a fun way to spin it. So now they have to be a content expert and also be a person that's trying to pull out that information. It's good that you do that in that class, that you're bringing in those real world current event concepts into a class like science. And I completely agree of seeing how that's applicable to every subject.
Yeah, and one of the questions we have the students answer is like, why should anyone care about what you
Yeah.
picked? Like, it's one of those things where like it's, when we first started doing it, like every kid, like half the kids picked like going to outer space as their article, something with Mars. The Mars was like the hot topic. It was like living on Mars. I'm
Hmm.
like, why does anybody in Emmaus, Pennsylvania care if we're going to live on Mars? And like
Right.
a lot of them were like, I have no idea why. So that's when we tried to kind of make it a little bit more, if it's a global topic, how does it apply to you here? Like you may have never left our area. So like, why would you care about like, why we're doing glaciers right now. So like, why is a glacier melting in Antarctica going to impact you here in Emmaus, Pennsylvania?
Right.
And that's kind of getting the kids to see that kind of makes these humongous science topics a little bit more relevant to them.
Yeah, and you're also teaching them, that cross curricular piece with writing, of knowing your audience, how to dictate the information towards your audience or pull out the important information and relate it to your audience. So I think that's awesome. So our last segment that we ask all of our guests, same four questions, is called our exit ticket, and we're gonna hit that now, and then we'll wrap up and get out of here. This has been a great conversation so far, Chris. So, question number one: what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
We talked about it earlier, encourage them to get involved. I think helping a student find a spot, find something that they're passionate about, whether it's in your class or anything else within the school, like kind of trying to get them to realize the things that they could be good at. I think that's really important. Um, Goes beyond the content that you teach, but trying to get kids to feel good about something that they are involved in and how can they move it forward in a productive way.
Awesome. I totally agree, especially in that middle school and high school age. So, what is the best advice you've ever received, whether it be from a colleague, a supervisor, or even a student?
This was somebody that I did co-teach with for 1 year. She was a social studies teacher. She was an instructional coach. And she said to me at one point, her name was Debbie Zosky, and she said to me, you should teach every kid like the teacher is teaching your own children. And if you wouldn't do, or if you don't think that like what you're doing is good enough for your own kids, then why are you doing it for someone else's kids? And that has always stuck with me. It was probably, I don't know, 10 years ago now, maybe a little less than that. But like we so often we give so much to the profession and so much to the students that we teach, but like we all hope that when our kids are, and I know your kids are a little younger than mine, but like when they get into a classroom, we hope that all teachers will give them the same amount of, respect and effort that we give to our own kids. So I think that that's always stuck with me. It's so basic, but so important because a lot of times, that's all we want. We want to do the best for our own kids. And, why would we not want to do those for the kids in the classroom that we're in?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I had my first year district level supervisor kind of give that same idea, and it was for his role. He was an assistant superintendent. It was, he was going to ensure that every classroom was delivering something that he would be proud for his own child to be in, and that definitely stuck with me as well. So the school year goes in waves. There are days and weeks where we struggle to survive, whether it be report cards, conferences, those times where things just pile up on us. When we are in that moment as an educator, what is something that you would want to say to all educators so that we can power up through that moment of struggle?
Well, I think today, in 2022, I think a lot of us are trying to find that power up moment. I think again, this is going to sound cheesy, but always refocusing it on the kids. I think that's we're all here, I think, for the most part because we like working with kids. And as a special educator, like, I sympathize with all the special educators listening about the amount of paperwork, the amount of other stuff that prevents me on a day-to-day basis from like just interacting with kids. So I think whenever those kinds of things come up, refocus on the kids. And especially now that we're hopefully people that are listening, we're back in school, whatever that looks like for wherever you're at. Just that's the kind of the golden ticket, I guess, is kind of like refocusing on the kids and just kind of taking a step back. And you know what, if you take a day where you're just going to do like games with the kids or doing stuff that's fun. Like, my co-teacher and I, we decided at the mid-year point that like school wasn't very fun. Like, the kids didn't look like they were having fun, like we weren't having fun. So we're trying to do more things that, and I always tell the kids that like there's different fun. Like, Friday night fun with your friends looks different than school fun. So we're having like school fun. So like try to find ways that you can reconnect with students that's fun, and like encourage them and try to encourage yourself to like want to be there. I know that's not like, obviously it's not going to be easy to do, and like when you're inundated with other stuff, but like on the days where I've been able to like do like a game of puzzles or like Wordle or like other like stuff to like kind of just bring it back to like interacting with the kids, I think that has kind of made that a lot better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, if you're bored or you're not having fun at work, whether you're a teacher or you or any other profession, that sucks. I mean, going to work and not having fun is just not enjoyable. And as teachers, we have so much pressure and so much is put on us. It was before COVID, it is more so now, but we also have total control to just have fun with the kids. And if they're not having fun, they're not learning as well as they could be. If they are having fun, even if you're quote unquote wasting time having fun, they're going to learn more when you get back to the academic rigor. So I couldn't agree with that more. So the next
And
question,
I often
go ahead, please.
Okay, go ahead. No, I was gonna say, and I often joke with the kids, like you can. It almost feels like you're a stand-up comedian or something. Sometimes you're up there and like you're looking at these blank faces, and it's just like I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make this more fun for you, but like, and then you just kind of deviate from the plan. So like, I think we're all kind of hoping, as the spring kind of comes here and we kind of move past some stuff to move back into, a little bit more fun. But yeah, I agree. Taking that time out is, I think, super important.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's easy to fall into facilitating a repetitive classroom. What do you think separates teachers who are constantly seeking change, innovation, and new teaching strategies?
I just think that they want to. I think a lot of times, like, a lot of people get set in their ways. And I know, no matter if you are a third year teacher or a 20-year teacher, like when you find something that works, you don't like to change it up. But like, I think a lot of times you have like they always say like there's like 10% or 20% that are like, no matter what the new thing is, they're all in. And not everything you have to go in all in on, but like finding like one thing. Like, we always encourage students to try new things and we encourage students to kind of go outside their comfort zone. But yet, when a teacher is asked to kind of do it, sometimes it's like, I can't do that because I have to do A, B, C, D, E, F and go all the way through the alphabet. So try to find something that you're interested in. Try to find something that maybe you think is interesting. Just mixing it up, and you don't like, you shouldn't have to like reinvent every lesson. You shouldn't have to reinvent everything, but maybe finding like one thing that can be different. And I think it just kind of gives you a little bit of like, kind of challenges yourself a little bit. I know there are times where I just like feel like I would like to do something entirely different and challenge myself. And maybe that's just kind of where sometimes you have to get to kind of change your attitude on what's going on. So I think a lot of times it's just kind of like getting out of that mindset of like, I can't believe I have to do this again, to like, let's try something a little bit different. And again, that's different for everybody and what that looks like. So it's easy to fall into those things, but getting through it, and with like help of colleagues or seeking like social media is like a really good spot to get new ideas. So kind of finding a way to get those new ideas, whatever you're comfortable with, and just trying stuff in the class. And I think that's, I think that's important. It's no matter what level you're at of teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, pick one lesson, pick one a year, one a semester, one a marking period, whatever you're comfortable with, to just try something different. And you might decide, that was great, I'm going to do that. Or you might decide the way I used to do it is better for students and for learning. So Chris, I've really enjoyed this conversation. How can our audience follow along with you, connect with you, and continue on your journey?
So the first way is definitely, listen to the podcast. And this is the part where I get to be my own self promoter here. So it's at www.ninthgradeexperience.com. We have video, we have audio. If you search on YouTube, if you go to Google and just type ninth grade experience in, it should be the first thing that comes up. My Twitter is at Chris Stuchko. So at ChrisStuchko. I have an Instagram that's ninth grade experience, and I have a TikTok that's ninth grade experience, but I have not put anything on it yet. So I'm waiting for that like spark of inspiration to do that. I'm on Facebook too with the stuff for the podcast, but it's not really, it's just more of a podcast thing. But those are kind of the spots. Twitter, Twitter's a good spot to reach out. But definitely, like, the podcast is something that I really enjoy, and just trying to get the word out there about it. And what I often say at this point too is, like, if you have a ninth grade story that you think would be awesome, if you're listening in Wisconsin or New Mexico or, Central Bucks East or West, boo them, but or if you're from South, whatever, if you're listening from anywhere and you have a cool ninth grade story that you think should be on the podcast, I'd love to hear it and be able to share it and, you know, do stuff with that. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about special education and the ninth grade experience, and, the two things that I live on a daily basis. So it's nice to be able to kind of talk about it and have a fun conversation. So I appreciate you offering me to come on.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate you joining us, and we will link to your social media, your website, your podcast, everything that we can on our show notes page, which can be found at poweredup.com/show62. And if you are listening to us for the first time, please subscribe, whether you're listening on a podcast platform, you're watching us on YouTube. Please hit that subscribe so you can tune in every week, where almost every time I'm interviewing an amazing educator, just like Chris here, telling their story, sharing their passions, differentiating themselves from what, makes their classroom experience special for their students. And Chris, what you do I think the podcast is incredible. I'm definitely going to tune in and listen to a couple of these episodes, because I'm interested to hear some of these stories, especially the student ones. But what you're doing on a daily basis for your kids to give them those self-advocacy skills, just please keep doing that, because that is what they need, whether they're on your caseload or not. That's going to be a valuable skill for them. So they're extremely lucky to have you at East Penn, and your kids are extremely lucky to have you on a daily basis. So thank you everyone for listening, and we will talk to you next time. So on behalf of Matt Rogers, who unfortunately could not be with me here tonight, as we power down this episode, Chris, you left us feeling powered up. Thanks again.